What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down the new 5.08 agent tier list. And we're going to talk about Harbor's impact potentially on the meta. There's a lot we got to break down and talk about. But the Game League website's the best place to pop off, dominate, and climb with tips, tricks, and everything you need in order to make yourself the best player possible. Go check it out right now in the links down below. Now, there haven't been quite as many big events ever since Champions, but we do still have some pro data to go off of, and we're going to base part of this list off of your average bit of ranked play as well. So we're combining the two and making a tier list that will work for you for the rest of this act unless there's any big changes. Now, there's three characters that aren't very good currently at a pro level, but these characters not only have high win rates, they are dominant in ranked play. So it's really weird where we put these characters. We could put them all the way in D tier, but for ranked play, they're closer to S tier. So it's very weird. I'm going to put them in their own category, and it's three characters. Now remember, all three of these characters got changed relatively recently. Of course, Yoru and Reyna was very recently, and Yoru was already strong when mastered, and in ranked play, he had a fairly high win rate. Reyna is a character that is always just a stomp character that stomps everyone, especially in the hands of the best player in the lobby, so typically a Smurf character. But with her new flash having infinite range and her whipping out her gun quicker, she actually is a decent counter to ops. And for the chaos that is ranked play, being able to just throw out a blind and rush in with your team is a great way to take a site, and you don't have to deal with an op angle. So I'd say that Reyna is actually pretty high up on this list, closer to S tier for ranked play specifically. And then Phoenix is said to have one of the highest win rates across ranks. Very difficult to turn on flash, has a ton of versatility, and is one of those characters that isn't a master of any one thing. So if you have the coordination, you don't need his entire kit. But as a solo individual, he's amazing because he does so damn much just for you. And you can clear a cubby, force your way onto site with a wall, flash through to make a play yourself. I mean, you could just kind of do it all in this character. So closer to A tier for ranked play, but still D or F tier for pro play. Now moving on to the true D tier, we have Cypher. Unfortunately, Cypher is just really weak right now. He has a lot better options in the Sentinel category, and out of all the Sentinels, he's by far the one that has gotten shafted the most. Cypher needs buffs, he needs it bad, and yeah, I mean, I'm gonna just keep reiterating it until Riot buffs this damn character, because honestly, he is in need of it, and he's not really worthwhile to pick right now, unfortunately, unless you're an absolute god at Cypher. Now next up, let's talk about some characters that can work in coordinated strategies. Neon and Astra. These are characters that would be towards the C tier, actually. And while Astra is very good and picked on maps like Pearl, besides that, she's not picked a ton, especially in ranked play, and it's going to be hard to get a lot of value out of her unless you can play around her utility with your team. Now, if you have a duo, or maybe you're rocking a trio, and they'll work around you, then Astra can be fantastic, and you could play her on a ton of different maps as long as they don't need a line smoker, so you can't really play her on Breeze, for instance. But on the majority of maps that a dome smoker will do, Astra can work if you have the proper team play. But in general, for ranked play, characters like Omen will give you more agency over playmaking and your wins and losses. Now, Neon is another character that can just completely stomp in a ranked game if you're really good and you've mastered her movement. But Neon is far better when you have someone to set you up, whether that's a Sky, whether that's a Breach, a character that can really set you up and allow you to go in properly and have these really clean engages. It's going to allow you to get inherent value every single round. Of course, maps like Fracture and Haven are best for Neon, but she is useful in a ton of different situations as long as you have that synergy component. If not, running in without any form of utility to set you up is going to be pretty hard to get consistent value. There's a lot of RNG that can happen in those engagements, and unless you're absolutely cracked out, it might be difficult for you to get value. Next up, let's talk about the B tier, and I think there's a ton of characters that go into this category, and these are characters that are legitimately very strong, but there are set situations where other characters are more optimal, or there are many alternatives in their role. So first off, we have Sky. We talked about her a bit. She's really good at setting up her team. Changes to her have made her weaker as a ranked character, but if you have that duo partner that is going to coordinate off of you, she can be hypothetically even better. Now for pro play, she is going to get a little bit better, I believe, although that still remains to fully be seen. She's still seeing a reasonable pick rate in tier 3, but until we see some official tier 1 tournaments, it's going to be hard to know where she'll fully end up. And then we got to talk about Brim. Brim's a very reliable choice. He's even the favored character to pick in both pro play and ranked play on maps like Fracture and Bind. And I do think that he's one of the best controllers to fill to. He's a very simple character to play at a base level and do your job. His smokes aren't difficult or hard to use, and you're gonna get a lot of value just stopping rushes, smoking off a rush, mollying, holding the smoke, killing enemies that push through without any information. You can really lock down a site as this character, and in ranked play, I think that having the extra versatility of the stem beacon is also just great for trying to rotate or make quick executes. Next up in the B tier, we do gotta talk about Killjoy, another character that could probably use some buffs, but she's still actually seeing quite a bit of play on one map, Ascent. And it's kind of interesting because we're in a situation where that is the only map in pro play where Chamber doesn't see a crazy amount of pick rate right now, and it's being primarily Killjoy. It's very interesting in that regard. And I see no problem with you playing Killjoy on Ascent every single time if you wish to. That doesn't mean you can't use other characters if you want, but I do think that she's really strong there. But there are many maps where I think you probably wouldn't want to play her at all. Maps like Breeze, for instance, it might be very hard for you to get value out of her kit, and the fact that things are so far away means that you can never lurk around, make plays, rotate early, or else it's just going to turn off your utility. So, very weird situation for Killjoy. If they upped that range or got rid of it altogether, I could see her basically being more playable on some of these other maps, but that depends on if Riot wants that. Next up, we got to talk about Sage. And Sage has a really balanced win rate across the board. Very high in ranked play, and in pro play, she's seeing play on a number of different maps. Icebox, Fracture, a little bit of Bind, a little bit of Pearl, and I think that there's a lot of places where you can get Sage to work. Now, unfortunately, she's being held back slightly by the power of initiators and the power level of her Sentinel counterpart at the top of the ladder. But I don't think you should sleep on this character. For ranked play alone, I would put this character in the A tier, but for the combination of high rank and pro play along with ranked play, I would put her solidly in the B tier. Now, the last character that we got to talk about in the B tier is actually Breach. And if we did pick rate alone, he would undoubtedly deserve A, but he's kind of the opposite of Sage in that Sage is a little bit better in the disorganization and the randomness that happens in your ranked games. Breach is not. He wants control and specific strategies to be good. He's very good on maps like Fracture and Haven, but even if you play him on these maps, unless you have a teammate that is willing to capitalize on your strategies, you're not going to get a ton of value off of him. Breach is a true setup initiator where he can't really make that many plays himself, and he wants to set up a Raze or a Neon or a Jet or pretty much any character on his team. It doesn't really matter who it is, just someone that can be the swing point to his utility setup. And if you can't do that game to game, then he's not going to be amazing, but he's still going to be playable. And I do think that if you're rocking a duo with this character and setting up your coordination and ability use, he's going to be phenomenal, and you're just going to stomp a ton of games. Now, of course, we got to talk about Harbor. And Harbor has been one of the most controversial agents coming out, where some pros think he's great, some pros think he's trash, and the community is completely split. But I'm going to put him solidly in the B tier. Now, the thing about him, though, is I don't necessarily think he'll see the most amount of play as a solo controller. We've seen double initiator metas, even triple initiator metas for a while, but we've never really seen a substantial double controller meta because we haven't seen a controller that has utility quite like this. He really has a ton of flexibility with this kit, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a double initiator, double controller Sentinel composition or something along those lines. I know that a lot of players see his kit and they say, hey, he can't really do the same jobs that other controllers do, but I don't really think he needs to do those jobs to still be good. And we're gonna have to wait and see once players master him just how he is played in certain compositions. But I know for a fact that many of you are gonna have to learn how to play around him as a solo controller anyways, because people are just gonna lock him, and it's better to have a Harbor than no controller at all. I mean, let's be honest. Next up, we gotta talk about the A tier, and these are characters that are very powerful in the meta, definitely characters that you're gonna play against consistently, and maybe you should consider trying these characters out yourself. First off, we have Raze, really solid pick rate across the board, Haven, Fracture, Icebox, maxed out on Bind, good pick rate on Pearl. I think that she's one of those characters that is even better in ranked play, gives you a lot of skill expression and ways to completely outplay your opponents, and a substantial amount of inherent value in every single game, which is always good for those days, but you just can't aim quite right. Next up, we do got to talk about Jett. Jett's really great on many maps like Ascent, Haven, and Breeze, and she's also a character that you could basically play on any map in ranked play. She gives you a ton of agency over your own peaks, multiple challenges. I think that Jett is an absolute all-star for ranked play and definitely a character that you're going to play against a lot or you're playing a lot. Next up, we do got to talk about Sova. Sova is still a monster, and I know that Fade has kind of stolen the limelight a little bit, but Sova is still the preferred controller for information gathering on Icebox and Breeze, still played on Ascent, sometimes in a double initiator composition, and for ranked play, if you become good at Sova, you can play Sova in every game. You could just rock this character. He's insane. He's really, really strong. And while he's not as easy to get value as a Fade in some situations, if you're really crafty with your utility use, you can still make him work. And I think that he's still really strong. Definitely a character that you should not sleep on just because there's a little bit of competition for probably the most impactful sub role in the entire game. Last but certainly not least, in the A tier, we have Omen, the go-to controller for Ascent and Haven. He's played about a 50-50 rate on Pearl, kind of splitting the difference a little bit with Astra. But Omen's even a better controller for rank than he is in pro play. A in pro play, but probably S in rank, because Omen also just gives you a ton of ways to have huge impact. Not only is he a really great lurker, he can do his job as a controller. He can set up teammates similar to like a breach stun or a breach flash. So he's doing so many different things. And then at the same time, he can make these crazy plays, be proactive with his teleports, and play around his own smokes and teleports in a way that allows him to get multiple kills potentially. He's just a really, really great character. But the last character that we gotta talk about in the A tier is an interesting one because it's KO. And KO is a character in the A tier, not necessarily at the top of the A tier, and he is definitely primed to move. Right now for pro play, he is definitely S tier. He's being played so much, but for ranked play, due to the new changes, he is a bit underpowered for that solo carry style that a lot of KOs were incorporating into their gameplay. He's not really a duelist anymore. You don't play him like that. You play him like an initiator. And if you want to play him like an initiator, you have to learn how to flash for your team and properly set up and use utility to help your team. Now, if you do those things, he's going to be insane. And he's going to be definitely deserving of that A tier spot. But if you can't do those things, then he's probably just going to be kind of a wash. And I think he would be worse if you're trying to play him as a duelist than pretty much any other duelist in the game. So definitely think about that before you just lock him in, flash through a smoke, and run through every single game. Now, last up, we got to talk about S tier characters, and we always got to talk about VIPER. Now, while Harbor is coming out, and he is a legitimate character that can challenge VIPER in some ways for the maps that she's good at, right? Breeze, Icebox, Pearl. From how it looks right now, it doesn't look like he's actually going to be replacing anything. And while he could replace dome smokers on some maps and maybe, you know, come up with new ways to play some of these maps, it's looking like he's going to play as a complement to VIPER on many of these maps instead. And VIPER is still the go-to line controller and still going to be dominant on the majority of these maps. Although things can change, that's the initial presumption from many pro players and myself as well. So you can make your own opinion on this, and this is one that could change because of Harbor's introduction. She is one of the few characters where Harbor directly challenges her role. So think about like when Fade was introduced. If Harbor is indeed strong enough to be a solo controller, then, you know, VIPER's slot is definitely gonna go down a little bit, but she's still gonna be just fine. Next up, we're gonna talk about the last two characters that are going to get nerfs at some point, according to Riot, but for now, they are the best characters in the game, Fade and Chamber. We already know why Chamber is broken. I mean, he's so freaking strong. You're gonna see him in basically every game, and if a Chamber is a god, he is a nightmare to push in through because he takes so much space. Now, making sure that you're properly forcing him off angles, waiting for that teleport sound before you engage, is a strategy that you need to incorporate every single time you're up against the Chamber. You need to get disciplined with it. And I honestly do think that the skill level of your average player is rising because Chamber's existence into this game, which is very interesting. And I do wonder what it's going to be like in a post-Chamber meta, if we ever get there. This character is just nuts. I mean, you could nerf him way more, he'd probably still be nuts. I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying you can. Next up, we do got to talk about Fade, and Fade is a character that is just really, really great in a ton of situations. She sees play on Ascent, Haven, Bind, and Pearl primarily, and it's just the fact that her dog is so great, and you can really just control the engagement with this character. You clear out the course corridors, no one's there. You throw in an eye as you push in, and you get to either clear out an enemy and know where they are while you're going in to give you a more favorable engagement, or enemies have to run away, and they just give up the space. So like, you get everything you want with this character, and her ultimate's great. I mean, there's just a lot to love about her, and she's definitely deserving of S tier as one of the top 2 best characters in the game. But this is the 5.08 tier list. Let me know if you have any questions, and go to the gaming website for tips, tricks, guides, and everything you need to pop off and dominate. Do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below.